Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Futurum Tech Webcast. This conversation is part of our interview series, and I am your host, Shelly Kramer. I'm joined today by Adam Sturrock, who's the VP of Product Marketing at a company called Amplience. We are going to have a conversation today about content management, digital transformation, and the role that customer experience plays in successful digital transformation journeys. And, before we dive in, I kind of want to set the stage a little bit. Customer experience, right? Everything today, and really for the last few years, has been all about customer experience. And that's changed so much in the last 2 years alone for a variety of reasons. We want personalized experiences. That often means we want personalized messaging that compels us to action. But how does an enterprise organization create unique yet consistent messaging that can be used across all channels for all customers? It's a lot, I know. Well, that's exactly why content management in the experience era is so important and why it's such a key part of, really marketing operations, sales enablement operations. I mean, content really kind of drives everything. And that's exactly what Adam and I are going to be talking about in our conversation today. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Absolutely. Well, it's great to have you. So tell us a little bit, if you would. I always love to hear my guest's backstory. So tell us a little bit about your backstory and your career path.
I'll try and, sort of whistle through my career history a little bit. So I graduated from university here back in the UK and sort of went into a developer role, and that was in a web design and development course. And it was in a sort of a mid-sized agency working on sort of e-commerce projects for retailers and brands, sort of national brands and regional brands. And then from there, we sort of came up with the idea of headless e-commerce back in 2013, before headless and sort of e-commerce APIs were really a thing.
Right.
I founded my own company with my two of the co-founders. We were all developers at that agency at the time. A company called Molten. So 2013, we set up maybe a little bit naively, I would say, in terms of what we were walking into. 3 developers trying to build a whole e-commerce platform from scratch. And then we went through an accelerator program in the UK that sort of helped us do that full time. You can imagine there's quite a lot of things to go and build functionality wise. It's quite a high barrier to entry. We launched like a V1 after about 3 or 4 months, and I remember like the first store that we had that went live on the platform was actually based in New Zealand. So it was very, very difficult scaling challenges sort of from day one.
Oh, I'm sure.
And then from there we went through Y Combinator in 2015, the winter batch. So we all flew to San Francisco and Silicon Valley for a few months. And then we came back to the UK. I think we raised a few $1 million. We built out an engineering team, re-architected the entire platform with a microservice-based architecture internally, which also externalized that as a microservice architecture for customers. And then we raised a Series A, built out a Boston-based sales team and office, like go-to-market motion. And through that journey, we ended up being acquired by a company called Elastic Path in 2019. And then at the end of sort of that acquisition process, I began consulting and left Elastic Path. So last year I was consulting for retailers and brands, going through various digital transformation projects, helping them sort of understand the space, understand vendors, understand all the different moving parts, and also started working with some technology companies like Amplience as an example. I was consulting with Amplience in sort of a product marketing role, and then I joined full time at the beginning of this year. So that's kind of 7 or 8 years condensed down into 2 minutes.
Absolutely. I think that's great. So talk with us a little bit, if you would, about what does it mean when we say a headless first CMS platform? What does that mean?
Headless means a lot of things. So it's a bit of a buzzword. To me, it really means the separation of the back end from the front end. So the back end is the databases, the content repository, the logic processing of the things that need to happen. And then the front end itself is the experience. So that could be the website that your customer interacts with. It could be a mobile application, an IoT device, any number of those things. And that separation of concerns means that you could get a future-proof, like in headless CMS sort of world and sense. You can get a future-proof CMS that you can interact with and drive all of these different experiences. So it's a bit of a misnomer, I guess, that headless, you do need a head with headless. It's just you could have many heads. That's what it sort of means to me.
That's what it means. So instead of calling it many-headed, we call it headless because that's how we are.
Yeah, it doesn't come with one by default, but you're going to end up with one or more.
Got it. Well, I thought that was a good place to start with our conversation. So talking about challenges, okay, the last 2 years navigating a global pandemic, doesn't matter where you're located in this world, there have been challenges for retailers and brands and consumers, of course, but we're not going to talk about that so much right now. So what challenges kind of coming out of this last 2-year period and moving ahead, what challenges are you seeing at the top of your customers' priority lists? What are they focused on?
There are some sort of elephants in the room, which we can come on to, but I think there's a sort of a backdrop, and there's lots of like industry trends and forces that are maybe outside the control of an organization that they're still having to deal with and tackle, from like the silos that exist within their tools or their departments. So that's sort of a team structure sort of perspective that can create operational drag and slow down the execution of that brand or retailer. You have like the likes of like the rise of mobile and digital, digitally mobile native first shoppers. They expect like those seamless shopping experiences online. You mentioned in your intro the need for personalization, and that people don't just want to be treated as like everybody else, and they expect personalized offers and content to be delivered to them, which in turn creates huge pressures in terms of content production for our customers, that they have to produce tens of thousands of potential variants. So how do they do that in a programmatic way, rather than you're not going to sit there and have a marketer creating all those variations? It's physically impossible. There's not enough time in the day to create all those variants. That's some of the challenges. There's obviously like making, I guess there's like opportunity as well, of like new channels. Like IoT is a classic example. How do you begin to embed yourself into the customer's day-to-day life in a way that's valuable to them?
Right, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about, we talked about future proofing, and I think that's one of the key things that organizations of all sizes and no matter what industry focus learned that was critically important over the course of the last 2-year span, right? We need to focus on being resilient. We need to focus on being able to take quick pivots when we need to. We need to focus on future proofing our business and thinking maybe differently than we have before, and taking fewer things for granted, like supply chain, for instance, and the fact that, whatever we need will be available at the moment we need it, because we know that's not the case. So I think that, for me, it's all about brands and retailers creating more powerful, sort of more meaningful experiences. And it sounds, weird, but the reality of it is, I think that we're all, this is what I've tried to tell my clients for a very long time. It's so easy to be commoditized today. You buy something and you think, oh, I really like that. Where did I buy that from again? And the experiences that we have sometimes are served up in social channels, or they come by way of email, or they come, and I feel like as we've moved away from, in many instances, we've gravitated from online shopping, where I know that I bought this at Target, right? or at Tesco or wherever, right? So when I want more of it, I go to Target, right? Well, now what happens is that we buy things in so many different channels, in so many different ways. We have no idea, even sometimes, the company that we buy things from. And that's really, I think, where focusing on creating a relationship when that sale happens, and starting to build customer profiles, using the data that you have to say, oh, well, Shelly, you bought this face cream or whatever, chances are really good. It's kind of like Netflix. And that's one of the beauties of Netflix, or even Amazon. And of course, gigantic examples, Walmart's another one. They have so much data that Netflix is constantly telling you, well, you've watched these shows, chances are good you'll like these shows, right? So I think that that's really where the opportunity exists for brands and retailers to get super smart with content development, messaging development, and then that delivery as well. So, I believe that what we need are powerful experiences that are fast, simple, and fulfilling. Um, what do you talk with your retail customers about what it is they need to do to solve the challenges that they have?
There's a few different things. So from a technology standpoint, that sort of that sea of sameness that you described, in when you have, like, you can go to any vendor or brand and get the exact same product or service. That's a commodity business, and you
Right.
might be competing with the likes of Amazon or a marketplace, and that's a very difficult place to be. So like you said, you need to begin to create those differentiated experiences,
Right.
and it really starts with the technology. So if you're picking up a SaaS tool which provides template driven website patterns that you follow, everybody ends up looking the same, and that's not going to create a memorable experience. So that's kind of where Headless
Right.
begins to sort of edge in, and you can begin to reinvent that experience and own it and differentiate it in that way. That's on one side. There is obviously the internal side as well, in terms of you need to sort of live and breathe innovation internally, and think about customer service, not just in the transactional sense of I'm just giving you a product or good. It's, like you said, creating a relationship with the customer. So that could be leveraging personalization engines and CDPs. It could also be thinking about new experiences that you're going to deliver to a customer. And especially in the pandemic, you obviously, anything that's like in-store and physical, that
Right.
becomes quite challenging to replicate. So you have like a customer of ours, Harry Rosen, Canadian menswear retailer in Canada. Obviously they have like men's suits, and they tailor those suits to fit you. How do you do that online? How do
Right.
you provide that same sort of concierge sort of experience to your customer? So they've had to re-architect not only there as they moved to Amplience, but they had to re-architect the surrounding experience to in some ways ideally be better than, not just to replicate, but to be better than the offline in-store experience. So that's the likes of like chatbots and quizzes that people can kind of go through to kind of self-serve a little bit, and then opt
Right.
into having that conversation with one of their store clerks. And that requires transformation, not just on the technology side, but inside of the business too, when it comes to retraining the
Right.
staff in terms of how are they going to interact with the customer. So
Right.
it's quite a complicated process to walk through. It's kind of technology and experience maturity and the actual team itself that's delivering that, and the structure of the organization. And in terms of like that future proofing message, you need to sort of adopt an agile like
Mindset.
methodology, mindset, lean, like being rather than being reactive to things. I think that's what a lot of retailers and brands sort of realized in the past 2 years with COVID, that they always had these like long-term goals and these long-term plans, and that's fine. But in that planning exercise, the execution will take up however long the plan allows for. But when you're
Right.
pushed and you're forced into doing something where you have very little time, the actual like reality is that you can actually execute on those things. You just have to cut
Right.
back and think in that agile like mentality.
Well, no, I absolutely agree. And I kind of, I've spent my career as a strategist. And, one of the things that I was thinking actually even before the pandemic happened, but I believe it's even more applicable today, is that, you know what? I don't really want to talk about a 5-year plan. I want to talk about an 18-month plan,
Mhm.
and I think that what brands, organizations, enterprises need to understand is that, the way we've always done it, where we make these long range plans, is not really the best path forward. And part of it is, understanding that we've seen such an explosion of technology solutions, right? Well, I am pretty sure you're going to agree with me when I say that that pace of innovation and new solutions is not going to slow down. right? It's only going to speed up. So if you're used to operating on these long-term plans, by the time you get into year 2, something that you're thinking about might already be obsolete, you know? And so I think that as leaders, and it really doesn't matter, you know, whether you're in marketing, whether you're in senior leadership, but no matter what it is you do, whether you're in IT throughout the organization, understanding that and understanding that this is, you know, this is kind of a ride that we're all on together, and that being comfortable with constant change, regular evaluation and reevaluation of what our processes, what our technology solutions look like, what does that tech stack look like, how can we augment that, how can we do better, how can we serve up better experiences, how can we create a culture so that our employees like their jobs more and stay. You know, all of that is part of the equation today. And I think so it really is beyond just what technology solution are we going to use. It's all these other things too. But I think the key point that I wanted to make is that I don't, you know, and kind of augmenting what you said, it's like the 5-year plan, you can still do that, but we need to shorten. We need to shorten those plans, and kind of, and that, I feel like that the pandemic taught us that in a huge way.
And it's interesting, like if you step back as well, like human psychology, like how the mind works, like humans don't like change, they like things to be the same. So you've kind of got to train yourself
Right.
and your organization to be agile. How if something happens tomorrow in your market that you want to be able to react to, how do you make that happen? Like,
Absolutely.
are you going to
And
be able, or are you going to be proactive? And instead of just being reactive, how do you be proactive and make some
yeah,
of those changes happen, and, you know, be more competitive and differentiated from your
yeah.
peers?
You know, I was interviewing as someone that's going to join our team yesterday. And one of the things that I told him, and I tell everybody in our conversation, is, you know, one thing I can promise you is that if you don't love change, love and thrive on change, you will not enjoy working as part of our organization, because we're in the change business, you know, and I believe that it, you know, we're not alone. It doesn't matter what your business is, how big or small your company is. Um, I think change is just something
It's like
that you
it's a constant.
it is a constant. And you know, there it's but it's also like life, you know, and you have no idea what life's going to throw at you, and we all start out and we have sort of a plan. And then before you know it, you know, you have a kid you didn't plan on, or you're buying a house you didn't plan on, or you're changing jobs that you know what I'm saying? Like life is all about kind of throwing you things, global
It's a
pandemic.
journey, less so
Yeah.
about the destination. And there's
Yeah.
always going to be another, you know, another peak to climb, another target or challenge to, you know, to reach to.
Right.
Um,
Well,
so
and
yeah,
your transformation journey too, this is a really important point, is that it is a journey. Your transformation is never done, because the rapid pace, the evolution of technology, the, you know, changing of solutions, more innovation, more creativity, all kinds of things. I mean, so to me, that's a very exciting thing. I know it's not exciting for a lot of people who aren't wired for change, but I think that that's super important from a leadership business strategy standpoint to understand, is that change is your constant and you have to embrace
yeah,
it. And
you can plot it on a visual graph of like technical maturity on the
yeah,
X, and on the Y sort of experience maturity. And an organization has a certain clock speed. And I mean, historically, I've seen organizations go through like transformation projects that are maybe 1 or 2 years long, and it's like a big gear change, a big step change up when they make that big migration.
right.
But that again, even 2 years could be too long to execute
Yeah,
on something. And it's like, how do you adopt a more agile, iterative approach, on a
right.
monthly cycle, or even a weekly or bi-weekly cycle? Um,
Absolutely. So now I want to talk a little bit about an experience management platform. Why do we, you know, why should SAP users, for instance, think about integrating a platform like Amplience into their business operations?
Maybe it makes sense to sort of step back a little bit and sort of go talk through some of the different elements of experience management first, just to sort of level set
Great.
the conversation a little bit. So we kind of covered headless CMS a little bit, and an experience management platform kind of encompasses part of that. So we can already think of Amplience as a headless CMS, that it has a back-end content repository, and we connect to other experiences. We also have to think about not just content, like words and text, but we also have to think about imagery, assets, videos, rich media.
Right.
So Amplience has an integrated DAM as well that we can pull into that content management system. So you have a single source of truth for both content and media. And then beyond sort of just the content management piece, when we talk about experience management, there's more to it than just content and images. You're orchestrating all of those front-end experiences. So it's not just websites. It could be a mobile application. It could be an IoT device. We've got lots of customers that are experimenting with these new channels. It could be driving to social or other marketing platforms and having that single place to do that from. That's on the sort of the output end of what an experience management platform delivers, allows the marketing teams to shape. On the back end side, it's the integration. So it's the data sources of pulling in maybe a personalization engine, pulling in commerce data, maybe something from a PIM, maybe something from SAP, and pulling all of that into a single UI and interface for the marketing teams to augment their experiences that they're orchestrating and creating.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, it sounds like it's a pretty foundational piece of technology.
Yeah, I would say so. In terms of like the new age that we live in, it's almost like a maturity model of like content management. And then we go headless and we have a repository, but then there's additional things that you need to get back towards a sophisticated experience. And when you think about commerce use cases specifically, those are probably some of the most complex experiences that you can manage when you think about the campaigns and the scheduling and the drops of content that you have to do. Maybe it's like we've just gone past Black Friday, like all of those things that have to be coordinated. And then not only that, you also want to be confident and sure that you can see those changes ahead of time. So you're not staying up until like midnight on a Sunday night to publish some changes for the following week. You're able to have confidence and clarity inside your organization when it comes to collaboration and workflows and governance, that you can, like, we have a feature, a time machine feature, where you can step forward in time and see your experience. It could be a website, a mobile app, whatever the experience is. You can step forward in time and visualize what that is.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is like, I sort of think of it as like a DeLorean for like the marketing team. Step inside.
I think that's awesome. I'm going to have you walk me through that. I'd love to see that in action. So can you go headless without an experience management platform?
You can, and we do see some customers do this, and it's an interesting thing for us to sort of, for me specifically, to sort of see is when a customer has maybe some legacy like SaaS platform or whatever it might be, and they decide to rip the head off, and then when they do that, they end up shifting all of their problems into the front end. So all of the changes that need to be made end up being made by a developer. And obviously, as a marketer, you're going to end up having those bottlenecks getting in the way of your delivery.
Oh, absolutely.
So you end up needing to bring something like Amplience in to be able to enable the marketers to do their day job and give the developers the tools they need to deliver on the marketing team's requirements. So you can go headless, but you kind of miss the value prop of headless, because it's more than just technology and just separating the front end from the back end. It's about the operational change that you're trying to make, that transformation that you're trying to make, to enable your teams to manage as many experiences as possible from one place, rather than having lots of different silos and duplicative effort.
Got it. So I know that many of your customers are SAP users, right? So talk with us a little bit. I'd love to know if you have, and I didn't ask you in advance to bring these examples, so you may or may not have them, but I love hearing about whether or not, I love hearing about customer use cases. Do you have any examples of, you don't have to tell us who a customer is, by name or anything like that, but do you have an example that you can walk us through of a customer who, decided to integrate, an SAP customer who decided to integrate Amplience, and, what their experiences were?
Yeah, sure. So we have a lot of different customers on the platform, and they span from people that are on SaaS stacks that aren't headless, and then we have people that are pure Mac, pure headless, and then we have those that are transitioning in between. And I think a good example is that we have a global health and wellness retailer that is an SAP and Amplience shared customer. They are running Spartacus headless, where Amplience is integrated into that front end. And that's sort of a combination of coming together of commerce and content together, where Amplience is driving the sort of the overall experience, the navigation, the imagery. And then from there, they're beginning to sort of look at other use cases beyond just like that website. So thinking about sort of the content element of that. So the buyer's guides, for example, helping somebody through that shopping journey of understanding about the product. It's not always just about the PDP page and the content on there, but it's also about educating the buyer as to what recommendations and what things they might be interested in. And then you can take that that content and commerce idea through into the blog as well, in terms of how do you create that content in there, and then how do you sort of upsell and transition that back into that commerce engine and the transaction for checkout. And so they're sort of in that sort of hybrid state of where they're moving into a more headless architecture.
Well, and I will say, my husband occasionally refers to me as a professional consumer. And so I buy a lot of things on the internet. And, I really use content assets that are on a brand's website. For instance, if I'm buying skincare products or whatever, I'll pop over and look at a blog and read a blog about certain whatever things that are interested to me. And as somebody who in years past has developed content for retailers to support their blogs, that's a big chunk of work. Right? I mean, it is a big chunk of work. So when you can use a platform like Amplience that can help you connect all those dots and create and manage that kind of content, I think that's a big deal.
It's about keeping it on the same property too, because historically, if you look at a traditional, the struggle between content management system and an e-commerce platform,
right?
Sometimes those digital properties end up being split, where you have a subdomain or a completely different digital property, and that's not great when it comes to SEO and organic traffic.
Right.
And you're wanting to drive people to a single destination, a single place, and you don't necessarily. And that also comes back to sort of the customer journey itself has shifted as the shift in mobile has happened. Traffic is landing on PDPs, but they're also landing on other pages, other areas of your experience. And how do you tie that back together to drive that that relationship, that experience, to differentiate and create that connection with your consumer?
Well, and the other thing, as a professional consumer, my observation is if you don't get this right, you could potentially lose me, because I don't have the time or the energy or the patience in waiting for you to get your act together as a retailer. You know what I'm saying? So if I'm clicking around a site or something doesn't happen, or the purchasing process is too onerous. I mean, the more what I notice all the time, and of course, I mean, I know you're much the same. I am a student of human behavior. I am a willing, highly passionate student of human behavior. It drives everything that we do, that we think about, that we work on, and we implement. And when I have an amazing e-commerce experience, that instantly sets the bar for all of the other consumer experiences that I have. So I know it can be amazing. And when it's not, it just tells me so much about your company and so much about how you're paying attention or not to me and serving up those.
At the end of the day, it's all about the customer experience.
Yeah.
And if you're not delivering on that, they're going to be able to go somewhere else. They're going to be frustrated. I mean, everything's at our fingertips now.
Right.
So the bar has been raised naturally over time, and there's a global platform for competition now. It's not necessarily just even localized to a specific region.
Absolutely. And I don't think you can hide. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel as though for a very long time, we've seen brands be sort of happy with the status quo. This is our website. It is what it is. I mean, yeah, we need to fix some things and we'll get to that or whatever. But the reality of it is, with this huge shift to e-commerce that has taken place, that accelerated during a pandemic, that in no way is going to slow down. You can't hide if you're not doing it right. Your customers are going to notice.
At some point we'll see some more like blockbusters of like the e-commerce world, where those that haven't adapted and become agile, that decided to stick with their technology choices and their approach of like the category browse and then the PDP page and then the cart and checkout, that linear flow.
And it's so time consuming and so exhausting.
That's not the experience that people have on mobile.
Yeah.
anymore. They're kind of they go from a Google search or some sort of social feed
Right.
into a PDP, and then they kind of want to get like one click and they want to get out. They don't want to be maybe in there, or maybe it depends on the buying journey of what they're purchasing, in terms of like, are they sure about what they're going to buy? And you kind of want to be able to support that decision-making process, which is where sort of buyer's guides or content and commerce can really come in, or the romance copy on a PDP page, where they're kind of getting further into that evaluation process and ready to buy.
Yeah. I think we're going to see a lot of refinement moving forward into 2022. What else do you see on the horizon? What are you seeing from your customers, or requests that they have of you, or just industry trends? I'd love to hear your thoughts as we wrap up this conversation.
Yeah, so I think the past year or so, we've obviously seen sort of curbside pickup and buy online and pick up in store increase, and that sort of trained the consumer on having that as an option, as a convenience as well. I think that's going to continue even post pandemic, when that eventually happens. That's going to stay around. I think there's also like self checkout is going to be huge as well. Amazon's obviously making some headway with their stores, and we're going to probably start to see other retailers and brands trying to sort of catch up to them, because that's the ultimate in terms of seamless shopping experience in store. We're going to see the same thing happening online, where Amazon's got the one-click checkout. Like, how do retailers and brands get the same one-click experience? We've obviously got sort of the cookie apocalypse that's going to be raining down on us at some point, where a lot of the retailers and brands that may have relied on third-party services and analytics in the past may need to begin thinking about a CDP and bringing together all their customer data in one place, so that they can own it and they can, from that data, drive their business forward. And I think by
the way, that's always been the smart path. It's just not been the path because of the cookie world that we've lived in, that we haven't always, owned our data, had it accessible, everything else. So I think that even though it's a challenge, I think it's an exciting time.
It's a good forcing function. And I think we're also going to see the continuing adoption of Headless and Mac, which we haven't really talked about, but sort of the evolution of Headless and getting towards sort of composability too, because I guess there's maybe some misconceptions, or maybe there's some things maybe quite well placed when it comes to a retailer or a brand knowing if they're ready for Headless or not. And that is, around their technical maturity. Do they have a development team or an SI that they can come in and bring into that process to help them, set up their architecture and then maintain it going forward? What does that plan look like over time? We're going to see the barriers to entry for Headless come down as the ecosystem continues to mature. That's already happening, where we begin to see more open turnkey integrations between vendors, which are more seamless to turn on. And we're also going to probably see some of the low code, no code movement being merged in with Headless, in terms of the nice WYSIWYG drag and drop editors, but not just for web, but for other interfaces too. So it's a very exciting time, I would say. It's also a lot of challenges for people to solve.
Well, and I don't care what it is. I was having this conversation with a friend yesterday. Marketing has gotten more complex than ever before. I think there used to be a time when you could truly step into perhaps a CMO role and feel like, I've kind of got this, right? I know everything I need to know. But with the evolution of technology, and with marketing becoming so technology driven and so data reliant, and there's so many moving pieces to the equation that really looking at your MarTech stack and figuring out what the key elements are is it's a fundamental part of your strategy.
Yeah, that's what we sort of see. Like, as you adopt more and more technologies, you end up with this fragmented ecosystem, and then your teams are working across dozens of fragmented interfaces to get one thing done. What we're trying to do at Amplience is bring that back into a single UI, so that you've got your cockpit where you can get in there and do stuff and pull your experience together without having to jump into other tools, which breaks your flow and slows you down. We want to see people getting sort of the same thing that happens in the development world of agile methodologies, where they're able to iterate really quickly. We want to see that same thing happen in the marketing world. We're still not quite there yet, but I feel like it's going to happen sooner rather than later.
sooner rather than later. Well, I think for the organizations who get it and who get that this is
Mhm.
kind of table stakes to compete in today's
We've seen
really,
we've seen some organizations beginning to experiment with that
yeah,
like cross-functional team structure, these little squads and pods of people
right,
that have a lot of different domain knowledge that come together to move faster. It's, I guess it's part of that organizational transformation and
yeah,
risk management of you wanting to make sure you've got something replicable first that you can
right,
take organization wide, but you have to start with like a small kernel and sort of iterate your way there and go through that process to learn what does and doesn't work, because every vendor and brand and retailer is different. They have
right.
different challenges. They're in different markets. The buyer is different. There's a lot of different moving parts that you need to kind of
Absolutely.
work through, because it's like I sort of see the world like as like a graph where everything is related to everything else.
Yeah.
And you've got to
Well, it
kind of
is.
figure out how to navigate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Adam Sturrock, VP of Product Marketing for Amplience, thank you so much for joining us. For those of you watching or listening, if Amplience sounds like something you're interested in checking out, and I think it should be, you can find it in the SAP store and get lots more information. I'll include a link to that in our show notes. I'll include a link to Adam's LinkedIn profile. So if you think, guy sounds pretty smart, I'd like to connect with him, do that. And but thank you so much for making time today to have this conversation. And I am with you. I think that this is an exciting time, and I think that this kind of customer experience platform is truly an important part of e-commerce operations and retail success.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, we'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, most likely.